Hello again. It's Carly with the Expat Focus podcast. Have you heard about our email course for new expats? You can check it out on our website, expatfocus.com. Simply sign up to our monthly newsletter to get free access. Today's guest built a successful business and brand around her passport country's most popular food, pierogi. And she did it in the bustling city of Shanghai. Gosia Modlinska shares why she first moved to China a decade ago, how she navigated local rules and regulations as she ran her Polish dumpling business, why she pivoted to cocktails, and became known for serving up one of the best martinis in town. Gosia, it's lovely to have you on the Expat Focus podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, brand building, it's not uncommon these days, in the days of social media where everyone has a side hustle.
Yeah.
But you decided to build your brand in another country, in China.
Yes. Yes.
So can we start with what led you to China a decade ago?
Yes. So that's a long story. I went to China in 2012. And the reason why is because I was at that time I was 28, about to turn 29, and I started thinking, okay, what should I achieve by the time I turn 30 years old? And I thought that I would love to learn Chinese language because I love learning languages. And I thought, well, yeah, it's like everybody says it's the most difficult language. So I will just, let's just say I wanted this kind of challenge and I wanted to have it achieved by the time I'm 30.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay, so you set a deadline.
And also I had a friend who used to come to China a lot on business. So she would tell me a lot of stories. And somehow in 2012, China became like really suddenly, the dragon of China started rising on the international scenes. I noticed more and more people around me, like students on the buses, on trams in Poland, they were learning Chinese. And I thought there must be something about this China and I want to check it out myself. So so it started, it was born, the idea was born in my head, but I didn't know how it would happen, how I would evolve, how it would evolve. And one day I was just procrastinating on some social media and I saw this ad, do you want to go to China for free? And do you want to study Chinese for free? And I was like, wow, that's a coincidence.
Yes and yes.
So I clicked and it turned out to be this au pair program that actually later was renamed into cultural ambassador program because the au pair program in China is not the same as in the rest of the world. So I saw that and I always was encouraging everyone else who was younger than me that they should always go and try this kind of programs when they are young, because when I was 23, I went to Alaska for work and travel program, and it was really life-changing for me, in terms of outlook for life, and attitude. And I always regretted I only did that once. So that's why when I saw that opportunity to go to China still, because the deadline also was that you cannot be older than 29 years old. So I thought, okay, so it's now or never. And I think, it's the sign. I want to go to China. It pops up there right in my face. So I'm going. So I submitted my application and I was quickly chosen by a family. Actually, I had to write my whole biography. I had to provide a history of all these diseases I had. I had to write like a whole portfolio for this program. And I was chosen by a family in Chengdu. And they said that I would come there, I would learn Tai Chi Chuan, the martial arts with their father, that I would travel with them. So it really all sounded so appealing. So
And you were looking after children as well?
Yes, and that I would spend time with the kids, but actually that's why I said it's not the same. That's why it was renamed more into cultural ambassador rather than au pair. is because you don't really look after kids nonstop, because every rich Chinese family has an ai, which is like the maid, but usually the rich families have, Chinese families have this kind of ai who lives with them. Ai means auntie in Chinese. So AIs, they clean, they cook, they take care of the kids, like, like all the hard work. And au pair in China is more like the companion that travels with you, and you exchange culture, you exchange the language. So it's not really, at least in my case, it was not such hard work. Yeah, I was chosen by that Chinese family in Chengdu, and I went there. However, after 3 months in Chengdu, I realized that Chengdu was not the place for me, and we did not really get along with that family. So I asked for change, and the agency that was in charge said, okay, then we have a family in Shanghai to welcome you. And I thought, okay, Shanghai. So at that time, I thought I would want to go to Beijing, because this is the place where, the right place to learn Chinese, the proper Putonghua, the Mandarin. And I really knew nothing about Shanghai at that time. I'm really embarrassed to say, but I really didn't know much. And I just Googled Shanghai. I saw images, I saw the skyline, and I decided I'm going. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to Shanghai in this case. And I arrived, and it was the perfect time, because I arrived just in the middle of October, and this the like really the best time to go to Shanghai during the early fall, September, October, and early November, because the weather is really fantastic. It's fresh. It's about 25 degrees. It's a little bit cool at night, but you just wear a light jacket. And I arrived in Shanghai on the 15th of October, and I just fell in love with Shanghai on that day. The sun was like really warm, and the air was fresh, and there was this smell of osmanthus flower all over the city. So it was really charming, extremely charming. And yeah, and the program was supposed to last 6 months, but I just knew already on day one that I wanted to stay longer.
So what did you do after the end of the official
So
program?
yeah, so after the program ended, I decided I would teach English, because it was the first best thing to do, the fastest way to find a job, especially that I had taught English before in Poland, so I had a lot of experience.
You had the right qualification.
Yes, and qualifications and experience. So I started with teaching, and actually it was a great step, because in the first school where I worked, I met a friend, actually a French friend, who a couple of years later, after we met, exactly 2 years later, had the idea to start a very first blog for foreigners in Shanghai. It was this WeChat blog, because it is this mega Chinese app that really evolved tremendously over the last 10 years.
Yes, WeChat is like really central to how
Yes,
people communicate in
to
China.
live in China. It's like, it's the way of life. And at that time, WeChat started the micro blogs started evolving. Uh, and uh, there were some mini Chinese blogs on WeChat, but there were no foreign blogs. So my friend, who was a fanatic of eating out, because Shanghai is especially a city of restaurants. It's the place where you eat out nonstop. So my friend had this idea to start a blog about writing reviews of restaurants, because he was this person that everybody was asking for recommendations, and he knew a lot of owners of restaurants already. But he knew that if he only would write this mini blog about the restaurant, it would be boring. And he said, well, he knew that I was learning Chinese all the time. during the program and after. And he said, like, how about you? And he also knew that I like to share some advice about some girly stuff, like where to do your nails or your hair. So he suggested, how about you write something, maybe something about Chinese language, or some advice for ladies. So I was like, okay, let's try. And I wrote this blog, Found in Translation, where I was explaining Chinese slang expressions through some stories of my life and through my observations. And then I also added some stories about my traveling around China and Southeast Asia, and about cooking, which is still my passion. And then and some advice about the city, and it really became quite popular. At this time also, in 2014, it was the time when a lot of little brands started mushrooming on Shanghai scene, because it was really easy. And I was doing interviews as well with some female entrepreneurs, especially. So it was really
It was
inspiring.
sort of the time when bloggers could still get cut through, and influencers were sort of
Yeah.
starting to really emerge.
Yes, exactly. It was that time. And the little brands started popping up on Shanghai scene, and it was great time to start, because later on in 2017, Shanghai became much more strict for foreigners and foreign businesses. Well, it's still kind of easy, but it was stricter than before. So it was great time to start and test the waters, because there were a lot of these markets, where you could
And
just
when
go.
you say test the waters, is this the point at which you decided to start a food and beverage business?
Yeah, that was 2016. Yes, it was 2 years after I started with the blog.
And looking at your website, am I right in thinking that you started a business in like Polish dumplings
Yes, yes, yes.
in
It started
China?
with yes.
That's amazing.
It started with Polish dumplings, because yes, so
Pierogi, I think they're called.
pierogi. Yes,
Okay.
yes, exactly. So because so my friend created the community that he called Shanghai Gastronomy Club, which was the very first community which united all the restaurant owners and everyone who was related to F&B, food and beverage industry. And he started doing these monthly meetups for people to meet and exchange advice and exchange knowledge. He created WeChat groups, because that was also the new thing then, where the communities started meeting online and offline. And of course, because I was the co-editor of the blog, I was attending these meetups since 2015, since the beginning of 2015. And I kept observing the vibe, and I really loved the vibe of Shanghai's hospitality, F&B. And I observed that there was no Polish food there, which I believe deserves a spot on the international scene.
Do you think your idea to bring Polish food to Shanghai, was it really a passion project, or did you identify or do any market research about whether Chinese people would be interested in Polish food?
It
I'm curious.
was it was it was a passion project, yes, but I also observed, because as I was going to these markets, that there were a lot of other foods from all around the world,
Hmm.
So
And just Poland wasn't represented.
yes, and I saw
Right.
that, because there were so many people, like from everywhere. uh and Chinese people are really, they love food. It's all about the food there. There is no dinner without taking pictures of food. The social media is filled with food. They spend the most money goes on food in China. So that's why I thought, well, I think they would be interested. And because China has its own type of dumpling, so it's a concept, but it's different. And a lot of people were telling me, "You're crazy! You want to sell Polish dumpling in the
I
kingdom
kind
of
of,
dumplings?"
I admit, I kind of thought that too. I'm like, I'm pretty sure China does this.
Yes, but to actually, every country in the world has its own
As a
type of
version.
dumpling. I
Yeah,
I created this map that represents, it's became really famous. It's called Know Your Dumplings, and it
that's
shows
cool.
that every country in the world has its own type of dumplings, but it's the same, with noodles, for example, right? Like
Yes.
China has noodles, and it's one of the most typical cheapest foods that you can find in China next to rice. But then there have been Italian restaurants in China for years before, and they also sell spaghetti. So and they sell ravioli, and people still eat it, right?
They
Because
can coexist. Yeah.
yes, because it's kind of, it's same but different. And the thing about Chinese people is that they like to understand the concept. Because if the concept is not understood, but I think it's everywhere. Because if they don't understand the concept, then these concepts fail quite quickly. But if they do understand the concept, then, like for example, in my restaurant, um, the people used to love to bring young Chinese people used to love to bring their parents and grandparents, because they would say, because they want to try the foreign food, but if they don't understand what it is, they will feel embarrassed and they don't know how to eat it. But they could come to my restaurant, they can eat pierogi with chopsticks, and then they will go and they will say to their friends, oh, I went to this Western restaurant and I ate these Polish dumplings. And then their friends will be like, oh, Poland has dumplings? Yes, they have dumplings. They are just look a bit different. They are made in a different way, but it's the same concept. So it's
how
like,
did you go about
yeah.
Educating your potential customers about the concept of Polish dumplings? Was it very much through your foodie blog and social media? Or?
It was mainly, like face to face, because in China, they love to see, especially the person who is the face of the brand. That's really important for them. And we did a lot of pop-ups with my former business partner. We did a lot of pop-up markets, because that's how you bring the food out there. You show yourself, you show the branding. We had like Polish typical folklore outfits, and you talk about it, and you let them try, you explain, and and you just tell them, well, it's like bol and jiaozi, jiaozi are dumplings, and we say, yes, these are Polish dumplings. And it's actually the easiest way to explain it. And it started, because there are also lots of American people, lots of Russian people in China. So they were really super excited, and Canadian people. And Canadian people think that dumplings, pierogi are their food. So they got ecstatic, and then they started bringing their Chinese friends. And we were at these markets, and Chinese people would always follow, and they would always go to foreign events. And they tried, and as I said, it's easy for them to understand. It tastes different. Then later on in my restaurant, I started organizing events called Dumplings Unite, which was the cooking classes that where I was teaching. I was collaborating with a dumpling shop where for 1 hour the Chinese lady was teaching how to make Chinese dumplings. And then we were talking about showing the differences. How is the dough different? How is the stuffing different?
To a
How is the
Polish
shape? Yeah.
version. Yeah.
Then pierogi. And sometimes I was also inviting later on some other chefs from other countries to also show, like for example, ravioli or Indonesian pasta, to show these different.
Yeah, the whole dumpling and
Yeah,
pasta universe. That's really cool.
exactly.
So you
So
spoke about selling at markets and also that you had a
yes.
restaurant. Let's look at some of the specific rules and regulations when it comes to having a food and beverage business in China. Did you start with food markets before you decided to have a permanent space?
Yes, exactly. That for the first year, me and my former business partner, we just did the markets because we knew that we observed what was happening, and we saw some people jumping too fast into the business and investing too much money without testing it. And testing, I think, is the most important thing, because you need to see how the people, and especially Chinese people, if they will react. Because I've seen some concepts like Norwegian concept that was not really clear, and it pretty quickly failed, I think after like 3 months maybe, because they did not really understand what it was. And there were also some Eastern delicacies, some desserts that were not understood. So there were different things that I saw like what other people did, and then I decided to learn the lesson. And for a whole year, we were doing these pop-ups, but it started getting more and more popular. So after a year, we kind of got an offer to take over a small shop. Actually, we never really wanted to do a restaurant. We only wanted to do wholesale production. That was our goal. To have like a frozen dumplings business and just have it made, by a factory.
Well, I
And
guess
then
you're in the
sell.
right country for wholesale production, aren't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's what we wanted to do. But someone just offered us to run this little cafe for free, just help, because this person was too busy, but they wanted to sell their alcohol, and they said we can, as long as we run the place, we sell the alcohol, we sell our food, then we can do it. So we were actually pretty lucky that for a whole year we were able to use some spaces for free.
And what
Uh,
alcohol goes well with pierogi?
yeah, of course. And that's how later I evolved my business into the cocktail.
Oh, so
more
you can
more
eat pierogi with beer or spirits.
Yes,
There's
yes,
no
exactly.
clashes of
Yeah, that's
booze.
how later I actually evolved, it became like a pierogi cocktail bar.
Oh, wow.
uh yes. So yeah, so at the big, and people loved this concept, and but we had to go through a lot of dramas, because the first venue we took over, it did not have the license, proper license, because before 2017, because 2017 was when we took over the place, the rules were more flexible. But then there was this big dramatic scandal in Shanghai, where a French bakery was using overdue flour, expired
Oh, like
flour.
expired.
Yeah,
Oh.
expired flour, and they discovered that, and they were exposed by some unhappy employee. So since that day, it was March 2017, the authorities became super strict, especially towards foreigners. So they started checking um, mm, all the licenses, even at the markets. Before, you didn't have to have a food license to.
So you could just show up with your food and set
Yeah,
up a stand
exactly.
and
Before, it
sell.
was much easier. You just some
Okay.
paid for the stand, but later on you had to have proper license, and
What
proper.
about like food handling and hygiene qualifications?
Before, nobody needed that,
Okay.
and also later on, if you also in China, it used to be like this, that if you have proper connections called guanxi, you don't need all this food handling qualifications, licenses. Everything is done by your landlord, by the person who
Is
uh,
leasing you the
leasing you
space
the
for the
space.
restaurant.
Yeah, and
Right.
especially if your landlord has really good connections with the local police, then you are fine.
Okay.
And before, before, you didn't even need that. There were lots of places that were open as restaurants, but after 2017 they started checking, and every restaurant had to have this license on the wall. And actually, it's more important to have like this hygiene checkup rather than food handling license.
I mean, personally, I think that's probably a good thing to have when
Yeah.
you're selling food to the public.
Yes, so that was more important. So in some ways, China was more difficult when it comes to, like, now, for example, COVID, but some rules were also easier to get through.
So how about just dealing with paperwork and that sort of thing? You were learning
Actually,
Chinese, but were
yeah,
you at a level where you
yes.
could do your own business administration?
Actually, for that, I need, if you have a business in China, you need to have, there are three people you should have, which is an agent, an accountant, and a lawyer. every business, I would say, and as expats, if you're an expat, no, but as a business person, yes. Sometimes your accountant can also be your agent who helps you with your visa, but you definitely need a lawyer, and you need the accountant to
So
help you
that's how
deal with.
you navigated the paperwork.
Yes, to navigate through all the rules, because even if you speak Chinese, then the rules in the thing is that China is still a developing country. It is really, actually, when it comes to technology, it's 10 years ahead of Europe and US, but it's still developing. The rules are changing, like you see now with the COVID, right? Suddenly it's open, and before it was not supposed to be open, and they just change rules as they go. They are testing them themselves, so it's really, you have to adapt all the time, and only the locals have the fastest access to the latest news, so that's really important.
Gosia, how did your business change when you decided to have a bigger focus on the beverage part of it and bring in the cocktails and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so actually it well, when we moved to our bigger location, because as I said, we had to move out of the very first location because of the licensing issue and because of some crazy neighbors who were not happy with us being there, and they were trying to sabotage us. They were like,
oh gosh,
there was this crazy guy who was pouring some oil with fire. Fortunately, we met our
God, they
new
really
landlord.
didn't like pierogi, did they?
No, we were trying to bribe them, but this
with pierogi.
yes. And some beers and vodka. I don't know if I can say it in this podcast, but that's how you do it in China every year.
I'm understanding this. We have had guests in the past who have traveled through Asia, lived in Asia, and talk about how bribes in Asia are just kind of a part of how you get things done.
Yes.
It's not necessarily as sinister as how we know bribes in the West, for example.
Yeah. So even, so we had to move out from that place because there was this neighbor who just hated everybody and everything, and even his own family and all the Chinese people.
Okay.
So that's how he even, when he called the police said, we know what kind of person he is, but we have to come because it's our job and we don't want to come. But we have to.
Serial complainer.
Yes. So but thanks to that, we met our new landlord we called the king of the block, because he had a few real estates there, and he had all the guanxi, so like he knew all the people in the neighborhood and the right people. So we met him, and then he offered us his former house, because at that time also the authorities decided that our previous lane could not be a commercial lane anymore. So the landlord, he was leasing a space to another restaurant, and he said, well, if you want, like, you can take my old house and I will move here, and you just have to rebuild it from scratch. So I never thought I would come to China and actually build a house, but fortunately we had some friends who were architects and who helped us create the vision and gave us, they said it was doable. So we did that. So we moved to this new place, and we knew, okay, so now this is a really big investment, and food is only the symbol. It's alcohol that makes money. So at that time I decided that I want to train myself more in cocktail making. I had some friends who were working as bartenders. So I learned a little bit from them, and then I did my research, and of course I practiced in a restaurant, and it became my new passion. We actually became the place that made some of the most famous cocktails in Shanghai. And this year I was even nominated for Lady Amarena China as the only foreign female bartender. I got some accolades for some of the best drinks, so that was really rewarding.
That's really awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And so it really changed, and that's why also when I split with my ex-business partner and I rebranded, I changed the name of the brand because Pierogi Ladies was the first brand, but it indicated it's just mainly food and ladies, and people thought it's just like a cute bar. But that's why I rebranded into Jar Bar, because of first my kind of obsession with making jarred vegetables, pickled vegetables, which were also a part
Okay,
of the
we're
menu.
bringing in a third element here.
Yes. Yes. So,
Pierogi,
pickles.
cocktails, and
Yeah.
pickled vegetables.
Yes. There were three things. Yes, that were the three staples. And yeah, and then I kind of made the pierogi menu smaller. I expanded cocktail menu, and it brought a lot of new attention. And from there, I even the last project I did before leaving China that unfortunately didn't come to life yet for now was the bottled cocktails project that I was supposed to release this year. So I worked with with new business partner on creating new lines, like because this during the pandemic it became a new thing, the bottled cocktails, bring the bar to your home.
Yes.
So because the drinks were so popular, and actually people were often asking me to deliver, because in China also delivery is a huge thing. It's much cheaper than here in the West, and
until recently,
yeah.
China had a very strict COVID policy still in place, so people were
Yes.
still quite frequently subject to lockdowns.
Yes, and it
Right.
was also very difficult for restaurants because every restaurant owner and person who worked in the restaurant had to take a PCR test every day to work, So
What is the best pierogi, cocktail, and pickled vegetable combination, in your opinion?
the most popular pierogi, well, we had really a lot of flavors, but the most popular were pierogi with feta and spinach.
Oh, interesting.
And with some garlic and olives on top. Another one is the classic pierogi. It's potatoes, cottage cheese, onions with some bacon on top, and they are also fried in butter. And the other one was the quesadilla pierogi with chicken, cheddar,
It's
mushrooms,
like a
sun-dried
Mexican Polish
tomatoes.
fusion going on.
Yes. But
Wow.
later on, I also did a lot of other fusions. I did some, like Chinese fusion, different colors, duck pierogi, sweet pierogi as well. And people would and of course pickled cucumbers. That was the hit. It was
I
I
love a
also
pickled cucumber.
I organized the classes to teach people how it became really huge thing. The pickle workshops became more popular than dumplings workshops, because I was educating people how important it is to build your immune system through what you eat. So eat your way to immunity. And people really became aware how important it is to actually prevent rather than later cure. And the pickles were really a hit.
Do you think you had an advantage being an expat entrepreneur, business owner, when you brought pierogi to Shanghai in terms of, marketing your product, getting bums on seats and getting interest from customers?
Definitely, yes, that was one thing. But the other thing was marketing and the way I introduced it as well, because it was all, packed with this nice Polish patterns, with Polish folklore flowers, with pierogi shaped pillows, with a lot of funny posters and slogans, with bright colors. And
Okay. So the marketing and how
yes,
you marketed was
marketing
really
and
key.
yes, because I built a whole, like which especially Chinese media. I focused a lot on Chinese media, WeChat account, on the posts, on the videos, and then collaborating with other people, because we soon got a lot of invites to other places, because the concept was really bright and fun and happy. So it's food, but it's also the people and like the whole marketing. So that was something that attracted attention, I believe. Because I think if we just because I see there are now, when I left, and there are people, they are trying to bring some new concepts, but it doesn't always work. Or there are people who are fun, but then, if you don't have also the product, then also you will not stand out. So you must have a product that is really perfect. And that is something, about Shanghai. The competition is really extremely fierce, and the people are super demanding. They will pay high price for the food, yes, but they expect this food to be perfect. So you really had to bend over backwards to satisfy their palates, because even, people who went to Poland, they were texting me asking, where can I find the pierogi like you made in Poland? Because in Poland, for example, they just boil pierogi and they just throw them on the plate. They don't care about presentation. They don't fry them, but in Shanghai, that like people are really super, like have the bar is high, I would say.
You gave people unrealistic expectations about pierogi in Poland.
Yes. So there are some people who had pierogi for the first time in China, and then they went to Poland and they got disappointed. But the thing is that, also like here, when I observe in Europe, it's really different. In China, people come into a restaurant, immediately they come with the camera, they take picture of everything, they eat, and they immediately post on Dianping, which is something like Yelp, or like TripAdvisor together. It's another giant app for lifestyle and for restaurants, and everything will be reviewed there. So you never, like, everybody who will go will write a review. And this really will affect your position, your recognition on the market, because the people really read that. So it's really kind of stressful. So you really have to push to make everything perfect. So,
and you said the real money is in the alcohol sales.
Yes.
So tell me about some of the things you did to make your cocktails really stand out.
So what I did, I used a lot of natural juices and natural syrups. Another thing is that I did a lot of my menu was dynamic. So this is another thing in China, that you have to make the menu dynamic. It has to change seasonally, because there are a lot of seasonal fruits in China. And generally, every concept has a shelf life now of about 3 years. After 3 years, you have to rebrand, refresh, because people will be bored, and there's so much competition.
No one's making rainbow pancakes anymore.
Yeah. And yes, so the cocktails, they would usually include some elements, from the jars that I made, combined. So I would combine, for example, beetroot shrub with whiskey, or I would make pickle martini,
wow.
or for example, I I introduced generally people in Shanghai to pandan leaf, because back in
pandan leaf.
So pandan is the vanilla of the East. It's like this long leaf that kind of smells like vanilla, but more like vanilla married lemongrass. It's more fresh. And in Malaysia and Indonesia, they use it for food coloring, but also to make desserts. And because I had some people who approached me back in 2020 to to buy my business, bring it to Singapore before, but it just didn't work because of COVID and some other factors, because I did not agree to certain things. But anyways, I did research during the first lockdown in 2020 about the ingredients in Singapore, and I found the pandan leaf, and I decided, okay, even if we're not going to Singapore, I can still use pandan leaf in China because it's cheap there. So I started experimenting, and I made this pandan syrup, and I combined it in a cocktail with some classic Polish vodka, with some kiwi syrup, with lime, and I started introducing this to people, and that's how I made one of the top 12 it made it on the list of top 12 best martinis in town. So I really did a lot of research, and then I used also some seasonal fruit. For example, in the summer, China has wax berries, which are like these big berries, kind of the size of ping pong ball, and they only appear during the rainy season for like a month or month and a half. So I also used the natural juice to make drinks, combine it with some, for example, beetroot juice, and combine it with some ginger syrups, or combine it with classic Polish raspberry syrup. So that's what I started doing.
I'm really curious because you mentioned when you were selling at markets how excited foreigners in Shanghai were to see Polish pierogi available.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it was really important for you to not just capture that expat, that foreigner market
Mm-hmm.
in Shanghai, but also capture the attention of locals. So how important
Yes.
was all those Chinese language lessons
Mm-hmm.
in enabling you to really tap into the local market as well as the foreigner community?
Yes, it's super important, because in China it's all about building relationships with your customers, with your partners, with your clients, with your landlords. So that helped a lot in getting this amazing landlord who was the king of the block, because I could speak Chinese with them, I could communicate. So that was one thing, and also introducing the Polish food and the culture, because as I said, in China, the face of the brand is really important. And people, before, there were some concepts, like some people used to do that they would bring a person, although like behind the scenes was maybe run by Chinese, but they say like, oh, this person is the face. But then Chinese people like they got smarter than that, and they want to see that this is really the person who works behind the brand. I want to speak to this person, I want to ask some questions. And then you have Chinese vloggers coming to your restaurant and making their vlogs, and they also want to say like, oh, this is the Laoban, the boss, and ask some questions, and
And they
then
want to
they
know
will.
that boss is really Polish and really knows their
Yes,
pierogi.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. This is really important. And when you go also get your visa and everything, then you will get your visa when you go to, and they see that you handle your visa yourself. They, like last time, like before I left, I actually got visa for 5 years because I went there myself and I can speak Chinese. So they see I'm not just some random person who came to China. So of course, I I should, I am the proper person running the business. So if someone wants to start the business in China, it's really crucial, I would say, because you need to build these relationships, and then of course you have, you talk to you have suppliers that you need to speak with. You will have the neighbors that will sometimes, I need to explain something, the people around your restaurant. You never know, right? So that's for me, it's essential.
I was looking at your social media and you posted about needing to leave China pretty
Yes,
abruptly. So we are
yes.
speaking
Hmm.
both being located in Europe at the moment. What
Hmm.
can you tell me about when and why you left China, especially after
Hmm.
a decade?
My original plan was that I would maybe come back to Europe in 2023, because the things at the beginning of this year were still looking good, and I was about to start, the new brand, the bottled cocktails, and actually I had like one potential investor who wanted to open new venues of my shop because he really liked it. However, then we were suddenly hit by the lockdown, as I said, and when it turned out that it would last longer than a month, then I already knew that it's just, I've been fighting for so long. I've been fighting since 2020 for my
To stay
brand.
afloat. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, because the thing also about Shanghai was that the people who, like, okay, half of your customers are locals, but then there are also foreigners. And a lot of these people left, got stuck outside. And the rules were getting stricter and stricter. And I saw, like all these lockdowns, like the zero COVID policy was just brutal. And I realized that like at this point it was because sometimes you have to know when to stop, and it does not mean that you fail. Sometimes it's just the right decision, and also for your mental health, because I just felt so overwhelmed with this, and I knew it. Even if they opened Shanghai, it would not end there, because maybe you have seen all the protests and what was happening. So until recently, and people were still getting into lockdowns, the zero COVID policy was really damaging businesses, big and small. So I decided, well, it's not good for my personal life. It's not good for my business anymore. And that's why I decided, okay, I'm just leaving. I'm coming back to Europe. The brand is still mine, the Jar Bar brand, and I can bring it back to life somewhere in the world. And yeah, who knows? There will be still mess in China. Just because they open, it does not mean that things will be great.
It will take a while to calm down.
It will take a while, and there will be people now. Everybody's sick. Recently, one of my friends,
I read some crazy numbers.
my friend posted, like before there were all these fights with the police, and actually, like I don't want to give this idea that I suddenly hated China. I still love China. I love it. I feel, it's made my dream come true. It even helped me, the dream that I never dreamt of having happened. But it's just with this policy, it was just impossible. And I still love the country. I just do not love what happened there. I was really sad, and it really made me super sad that I did not get to say like a proper goodbye, but I just left. But I knew it was not possible for me to stay and just to kind of get this anxiety and keep this stress, in that environment. So yeah, but it just doesn't mean that I'm over. I'm still doing some online collaborations with some Chinese communities, and I'm super happy about that, because even after I left, like every week actually I get invitation, like I get some emails from people who want to book a restaurant, who are asking if they can order food. Some people, I made an announcement that I was closing, but apparently it didn't got to everybody.
Sounds like you need to look into that wholesale.
Yeah. Yes.
Gosia, I'd like to end this conversation on a positive note.
Yes.
We are speaking in the weeks leading up to Chinese New Year.
Yes, exactly.
Why is Chinese New Year such an important holiday?
So Chinese New Year is the Chunjie, is the time when the families reunite, because a lot of families, like they are usually apart for most of the time of the year, because China is so huge, but a lot of people from small villages come to big towns, and they usually stay there for most of the time to make money and send the money to their families in the village. So they usually see each other either twice a year. They can also see each other during the national holiday in October. But some of them, they just try to save money, and they will see each other only during Chinese New Year. So this is also the biggest human migration in the history of mankind, because China has so many people, and so many people move around during this time. And another reason is because, of course, there's a new animal of the year. So it's like this new beginning for Chinese people.
And I believe for 2023, it's the water rabbit.
Yes, it's the water rabbit. Yes, starting on the 22nd of January. Yes, it's the water rabbit, and it's supposed to be a good year according to Chinese calendar. Actually, everything that has happened so far, it's been true, because the year of the rat, the first year, 2020, was actually bringing major changes, and it did, because of COVID. And then and then following years, like now, year of the tiger was also a very hardworking year, which is true. A lot of us had to work really hard. But now, hopefully, the things are settling down. China is opening up, and we all worked really hard to get through all these 3 years of pandemic. And apparently, rabbit symbolizes patience and hope, and it also it should be a good year for all the zodiac signs in the Chinese zodiac, all the 12 animals. So fingers crossed for this. I believe I will definitely go to the temple. I always used to go to the temple, especially since I had my restaurant, because my landlords always told me, on the first day of Chinese New Year, go to the temple and pray for the money. And get the red thing. I always wear my red bracelet from the temple, and it does somehow protects me. Yes, so it seems like it's going to be 2022 was the year of the roar, and it was. The world was roaring. But now hopefully things will be more peaceful.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that.
And just finally, Gosia, I'm curious if you could rewind on your 10 years in China and make that move again. Is there anything that you do differently?
I think
Come home before the pandemic?
Yeah. No, I'm glad I actually stayed during pandemic there, because China was actually really good during pandemic most of the time. It's just this year that it became crazy. When all the world was suffering, in 2020, we were actually really good. It was just 2 weeks, and that's it. I think if I changed anything, maybe I would study more Chinese characters then. I mean, I keep studying Chinese all the time. I speak Chinese, but I would study even more than I did. And probably I would not put all my eggs in one basket, which is something I realized too late. But well, in this business you have to, because I had to quit my other job at some point to focus on the business. But yes, it was. Then I started putting my eggs in different baskets, but it was a little bit too late. So this is the life lesson I've learned, to be more cautious. And yes, it's because back in 2019 was the year when the business was like really going up and things were looking amazing, and nobody expected the things that happened. So I think the only thing I would change is probably that I would not maybe resign from my other full-time job. I would somehow try to divide my time and try to find
remove sleep out of your life.
Yes.
And then you'd have all the time you need.
Yes, but then at some point you also there was time when I just wanted to enjoy and also have time for myself. So yeah, but it's just a little thing, but actually I don't regret anything. I met amazing people. I traveled all around China, and I will still visit in future, for sure. I haven't been able to go to all the places I wanted to visit. So yeah, but I think I would not really change much besides this one little thing that at the end, yes, about being more cautious in business wise, but otherwise I would not change it.
Gosia, it's been fascinating to speak with you about your 10
so
years in China. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Carly. Thank you for having me.
That's it for today. If you enjoy this podcast, please follow us or subscribe, however you like to listen. We love your feedback, and you can drop us a message on social media. We are Expat Focus. I'll catch you next time.